Hey folks, welcome to Friendly Orbit, the podcast that draws us together no matter how far we fly. I'm Ceres, connoisseur of Critical Role, and I'm joined by...
Thea, in fear that this session won't bring me much hope.
Hehe. Yeah, there's not that many creative Daggerheart jokes left after we've done 4 other episodes on it.
You're glad that Thea's workshop doesn't also start with a joke. Otherwise, we'd
Yeah,
really be scrapping the bottom of the barrel.
yeah, I think we already are. But tell us what this episode's about, Thea.
Yes, today we are reviewing Daggerheart. Daggerheart is a game by Darrington Press released in 2025. And we were excited to try it out. So we gave it a shot, and today we'll tell you about our opinions and the good, the bad, and the surprising.
Let's go to the D&D kill zone.
Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
Daggerheart was started being developed in 2022,
Mm.
probably, allegedly, maybe, due to the OGL scandal of
Yeah, I mean,
2022.
almost certainly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember when it came out, but so Critical Role obviously is a very popular web show that plays Dungeons and Dragons and has made so much money. And I mean, they made Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, which was an official like um, partnership with Wizards of the Coast developing a source book. I don't know exactly when that came out, but I think it was like 2020, 2021, maybe something like that. I'm not sure. But so the fact that within a few years they went from partnering and making official products with Dungeons and Dragons to developing their own game when in between the open game license debacle happened. I mean, this is a child of the OGL, like all the other games that are coming out recently.
Yeah. That's why I said allegedly, allegedly, allegedly. It's like, yeah, we all know.
Yeah,
But yeah, the first testing material was released in 2024 for backers that we actually got to play. And in
yeah.
2025, it released to a lot of positive feedback, from what I can tell. And
There's a
so
slight inaccuracy in what you said, by the way. It wasn't a backed game. Critical Role had enough starting capital. This isn't a Kickstarter game, so that was the open beta.
oh,
Everybody
that
got
was just
access
the
to
open
that,
beta.
regardless of whether or not they were backers. Yeah, it wasn't designed like Draw Steel.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting. Cool. Well, yeah, we played the campaign frame included in the core book called The
hmm
Witherwild.
yeah,
And if you're interested in learning more about Daggerheart, you can check out our Thea's workshop episodes on Daggerheart.
yeah.
But for now, what you need to know is that Daggerheart is kind of a uh, D&D adjacent fantasy adventure in TTRPG with a bigger focus on Critical Role. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Daggerheart is absolutely descended from D&D in the way that it does its mechanics and stuff. You know, some games are unjustifiably compared to D&D. Daggerheart is justifiably compared to D&D, but instead of it has a more streamlined identity for what it is. It's more narrative focused. It's more improvisational. It's less complex in terms of rules. Um, all of that draws it more to sort of the improvisational theater kid kind of critical role side of D&D, away from a lot of like the crunch or like, you know, gritty attrition mechanics, you know, like, oh, you've run out of torches and spell slots or stuff like that. The game kind of goes in a separate direction into this sort of, you know, brighter, more improvisational, kind of friendlier, more honestly, more approachable space. Like if you're a new player, it's so much simpler to learn this game, and you know, so and I would say the core mechanic you need to understand about the game is hope and fear. So in this game, when you make checks, you roll 2d12s that have two different colors. One of them is light, one of them is dark. And you add those two numbers together, and that's your roll. But then you'd say with hope, if your hope die, the light die, is higher. Or you say with fear, if your fear die, the dark die is higher. And if both dice are the same, that's actually a crit, which is even better. But so this means that when you roll with hope, you gain hope, which is a player-facing resource that can be used to power a fighter's maneuvers and a wizard's spells and everything in between. And then whenever you roll with fear, the DM gets fear, and they can use that to warp to like make changes in the environment, to power enemies, to make enemies attack you and stuff like that. So it's like a DM facing resource. And these two very loose, very emotional meta resources really form the texture of the game as you play, which is why I emphasize it, because I think it emphasizes the earlier point I was making about like narrative focus
Yes.
and like not being so crunchy, not being so like
Mhm.
into the like realism of things, but being more into like what it feels like, into the emotions of things.
Yeah, no, agree to subscribe to all of that what you said, and to give some like general thoughts after having played this game as a player during the open beta, and now
Mm,
as a GM. I think Daggerheart is a very high trust game,
mm-hmm.
and in order to empower all of this narrative focus inherently, the game is much more loose on mechanics, which means that you really need to trust each other, especially the game master. As a game
Yeah,
master, you really need to kind of have, I think this expression is correct in English, the finger on the pulse
yeah,
with your table. You
yeah.
really need to like understand what your players like and don't like. You need to learn to not abuse the fear system while still
And
keeping
the
it
players too,
challenging.
right?
Yeah.
The players also need to not abuse the any loopholes they find in the mechanics, right? So the game kind of is asks of everyone to engage with it in good faith, right? Some games kind of say, all right, this is the puzzle, you try and break it. This is much more
Mhm.
of a game saying, no, this is the puzzle, and play nice.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I think that at least for the GM side of things,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about approaching the game in good faith. It's really about being able to kind of like walk the fine line between uh, not overdoing it but still keeping the game interesting. Because I think
Yeah.
that in a game like this, in any game where you're the game master, but especially in Daggerheart, it's easy to accidentally like overdo it, abuse the fear, just because there aren't very many guidelines. There aren't reference tables for balancing encounters.
Yeah, I mean, I keep
It's
coming back to this, like that it's got an improvisational nature. Daggerheart is a game that demands, or at least asks you to develop a certain amount of improvisational skills.
Mhm.
Like don't hog the spotlight, don't overdo it. Don't improvise in a clearly, blatantly biased way that advantages your character or the enemies that you're playing as the DM. Right? I agree with you. It doesn't just ask you to play in good faith; it asks some amount of improvisational acumen from you.
Yeah. And yeah, I'll return to this point. I'll return to this point later. But in the meantime, let's talk about some pros and cons. And
Okay.
let's start with the pros. I really enjoyed running combat because it was fun. It was quick. One thing happened per character, and then we moved on. We
Mm,
didn't spend a lot of time thinking, what do I do as my bonus action? Where do I move? Oh, wait, if you're going to rule it that way. The
yeah.
simplicity of the rules made it so that you could just describe what you want to do, and then you roll your basic attack, and then you're doing it, and
Yeah.
that's it. That's
I
really
I
all you
have a
need.
similar point I wanted to make. Daggerheart innovates in a few spaces that are long due for innovation in games like Dungeons and Dragons, and presents us with improved subsystems in multiple areas. And one of those is combat. Right. In Daggerheart,
Hmm.
you just take turns when you want to take turns. Like when you want to jump into the action, you say, "I want to jump into the action." And then if you
Hmm.
roll really well, Actually, the spotlight stays on your party and your team, and somebody else on the table can jump in, or you can even jump in a second time and follow up. But most of the time, then the spotlight will switch over to the DM, and the DM can activate any enemy, and any enemy of the DM's choice can now do a thing, right? And then it pops back to the party, right?
Yeah.
And that system of initiative might seem simple to you, but it means each side is choosing when they go, which means there is choice, there is expression. In D&D, you just roll a die, and the die tells you what order you're all going to go in, you know? And that's so much of a inferior system from the point of like trying to strategize or wanting to show off your cool character move, you know, or wanting to highlight your bad guy, right? Like if your bad guy rolls bad initiative in D&D, theoretically they could die before they ever take that turn. That's never going to happen in Daggerheart, you know? I mean, it's going to be extremely unlikely that it's actually impossible. It's straight up impossible. If you have a single fear, you can make sure your bad guy gets one turn at least, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You can absolutely do that. You can, if you feel like the battle is turning for the it's like kind of like making your bad guy look like a chump. You
Mm,
can also just like use a fear to improvise a cool fear ability that you didn't put on the stat block. Like the rules encourage you to like improvise a fear ability if you want to. So
yeah,
like you could literally be like, my boss is going to go get down, and I don't want to just like artificially inflate their HP. The players are hitting them for a lot of damage, and they're going to go down. But before they go down, I'm going to spend a fear and let them do this really cool, impactful thing that I
yeah,
just came up with because all of their fear-based abilities were not meant to be like super show off, because I thought the battle was going to be more complicated and take more. My bad guy would do more things. But then
yeah.
you're just like, fine, I'm going to spend the fear. They're going to do this really cool dragon action move or something. And then they die.
Yeah,
And
and that's also part of the improvisational nature of the game. That like you don't have to set up ahead of time exactly how all the fear features on your bad guy work and exactly what they do. You're encouraged to sort of improvise that in the moment, but you got to improvise well. That's the thing, right? If you improvise poorly, that can kind of make things unfun for everybody.
yeah,
I
that's
wanted to
going back to
say,
my point on like finger on the pulse. Like you need to
yeah,
you need to
exactly.
figure out how to walk the line.
I wanted to also emphasize. So we played, you know, a one shot that was about 4.5 hours of game time, maybe 5 hours of game time in total. Those episodes will be coming out after this review, and I've already started editing them. Right, and in the edit for in the first episode, there's a combat, um, and I noticed the whole combat is 30 minutes long. You know, and there's at least 4 character turns that I remember. Like each person in the party took one turn, and then I know that Copernicus's character took 2 turns. And so there's at least 4 turns that were taken during that combat on the side of the party. Um, and it's still just only 30 minutes, right? And if I imagine how long it would take for the whole party to take a turn in like Dungeons and Dragons combat and then get a little bit into turn 2, I would say normally that would take about an hour and 20 minutes, right? Like generally speaking, I would say for the whole party to go takes about an hour, and then like often you have like a 3-hour combat because combat is 3 turns long, you know.
Hmm.
So in this game, it was like half. It was like the Daggerheart has 2.5 times faster combat in my experience than Dungeons and
Yeah.
Dragons. By cutting out 2 things. One is sort of what I would call simulationist cruft. Some people might not appreciate that term, but basically, like, you know, simulationism is the idea that a game needs to accurately simulate kind of what real life, or at least what fantasy life would be like, you know, and that there's kind of like, you know, why can't I, you know, run 60 feet in a turn because it's not plausible for someone your size to run 60 feet in a turn, right?
Hmm.
Or like, oh, why can't I wield this weapon? Well, it's a bit too big for someone of your frame, don't you think? You know, something
Hmm.
like that. That's kind of simulationism. I mean, I don't know. Simulationism is super controversial. I'm sure lots of people have different definitions, but that's kind of what I mean by it right now.
Yeah, it's
You
kind
know?
of a legacy of TTRPG's origins as war games, where
Yeah,
people were like literally trying to simulate real wars, and
Yeah,
in
like
that sense of
what would the Battle of Waterloo be like? You know, like if
yeah,
I was Napoleon, you know, that's kind of
yeah,
a
exactly.
classic war game scenario.
Yeah, and so in that case, for those games, it makes a lot of sense to lean into the simulationism.
Yeah.
But if Ceres is like half mouse, half cyborg, like Seraph is like jumping off the roof of a workshop to
Yeah.
land in the middle of a bunch of soldiers and then like smiting them. Like we don't really need to consider what the realistic mechanics of a half cyborg mouse folk are
Yeah. I mean,
because we don't know them.
basically, it's like kind of like the shift from war simulator to movie. You know, I think many people, this game runs like a movie, um, and in a movie, you know, we're not keeping track of exactly how many arrows Aragorn has, or if Legolas had a good bowel movement this morning, you know, or if there's enough torches left in the pack, right? Um, and Dungeons and Dragons still does a healthy dose of its own simulationism, and so you know being so particular on some parts of the rules means that it's like, oh yeah, if you run over here, actually you just barely can't reach the enemy, so you can't attack them. Sorry about that, you know, that kind of thing. So Daggerheart cuts out a lot of that.
D&D still has the corpse of first edition strapped to its back, whispering in its ear.
Exactly. That's a fun image. Yeah, and so like that's the one part that Daggerheart cuts out. The other part that Daggerheart cuts out is like in-depth combat tactics. So like if you like Lancer, if you like draw steel, if you think tactical positioning should matter and like knocking around your enemies is kind of a fun combat thing, right? Or stuff like that. You want to combo certain features. Oh, if you use your ability, that gives them weakness to fire, and then if I use my fire ability, we can get double damage or whatever, right? That kind of tactics is all also mostly cut out of Daggerheart, right? On Daggerheart's turns are pretty simple. You know, you make one roll on your turn. There's not like a bonus action. There's not like reactions. Generally speaking, like on your turn, you either swing your weapon or you cast one of your spells, and then you're done. That's your whole turn. That's it. You know, um,
Yeah,
and
literally everything
so
is an action, or as they're called in Daggerheart, move.
yeah,
So like you don't have to think about action economy. You just do your thing, and then you either pass the spotlight to somebody else, or if you really want to, you can take two moves in a row as long as you're not failing or rolling with fear.
yeah. And that I think also the ranges in this game are sort of designed to facilitate this. So like there's different range bands in this game. Instead of like you can measure the game in like 5 foot squares if you want to. There's optional rules for that. But the kind of the base way to run the game is to speak about ranges in this sort of, I don't know, like very common everyday parlance, right? So you
Yeah,
don't say
intuitive.
within 5 feet, you say very close, right? And
Hmm.
there's like very close, close, far, very far, something like that. I think those are like the
There's
distance categories.
there's melee, very close, close, far, very far.
Yeah, and so it's
I
like
think melee is
these bands kind of have like an implied range in your mind, you know, like everybody understands to some degree. Everybody can at least visualize what the term very close might mean or what the term very
mhm.
far might mean, right? I'm not saying everybody's exactly imagining it the way the game does intuitively, and I think they can be a little unintuitive at times, but they're clearly designed for you to be able to play the game not on a grid, but in the theater of the mind, right?
Yeah.
To answer in the theater of the mind what's very far away is pretty easy, right? And is not as strict as like the banding marks that you would need for a grid. And so, you know, games that are designed to be run in the theater of the mind generally throw tactical positioning out the window, because you know when your players are imagining in their mind just this dramatic scene and everybody's fighting, everybody's sitting in a group, they're not actually like imagining a top-down view of the grid. Okay, you're engaged with this person over here and you're flanking here, you know, this positioning here. Like they can't keep track of that kind of positioning, right? And I think it's telling that this game is very much, in my opinion, a lot of the mechanics drive you towards running at theater of the mind. That tells you something about what they think about tactics, which is that, like, you know, I mean, obviously a little bit of tactics. There's some amount of tactical thinking involved in the game, of course, you know. Then most of the tactics come from should I take my turn now or later, right? I'm not saying there's no tactics, but that like a lot of the source of tactics in other games, like cover, strategic positioning, knocking enemies off of cliffs or into each other, you know, getting them trapped in area of effects and stuff like that, right? a lot of that's not present in the game, and that also speeds things up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, the game is really designed to be like almost spoken and really not like calculated. Like you just go like, okay, what do you do? I attack. I run on the roof and attack the monster. Okay, cool. Roll and like deal the damage. But like I feel like the fun of the game is really not in like seeing how many d8s you can stack. It's a lot more about that part where you describe your character running over above the roof, doing an acrobatic jump and
Yeah.
landing your hit. That's where the fun is. And like, yeah, if you want to be excited about rolling a lot of die, this is not the game for that.
So to summarize, we think that like DMing it is fun, that like the combat initiative system is fun, and that it's a lot faster. Cutting simulation is cruft, which I think is unfun, and cutting tactics, which I think is a bit of a shame because I do like tactics. But I understand
Yeah,
that that's not for everyone, you know.
yeah. It's
Do we go to a negative now, or do we stay on pros? Because if we do stay on pros, I have something related to the point that you just made.
we have a few more pros. If you have something related to what I just said, just say it.
Okay, so that whole thing you were talking about, the fun of the game comes from like narrating your cool character, like jumping on an enemy and attacking them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like that exemplifies how in Daggerheart, freedom of expression when it comes to your character, by removing simulationism and encouraging player creativity, replaces tactical depth in the mechanics of building your character. And that I think is actually really genius because basically Daggerheart is way simpler. And so it gives you less abilities to customize your character than in other games. And often this means you cannot express yourself as much, which might make you feel like you're put into a box. But that's not really what happens when you play Daggerheart because the game encourages you to customize your character narratively and in your mind and aesthetically and in the way that you describe them doing stuff, that your character feels just as unique and distinct and personal to you, even though they are mechanically much simpler. So the TLDR of this point that I'm trying to make would be that Daggerheart feels just as customizable as way more complicated games. And that's a huge compliment, right? Because one of the biggest advantages of complexity is customizability and self expression. And Daggerheart kind of gets it done, in my opinion, without being very complicated at all, which means it's super approachable to players who can't handle that kind of complexity.
Yes, yes, that is a very good point. The game really encourages you to figure out who your character is and like what you want to play from a pool of maybe mechanically shallow options. But in return, we've seen this especially with lineages. The game
Mm,
really wants to offer you like a huge variety of
yeah,
options. Like, hey, none of these go very deep mechanically, but it's
yeah.
almost more like a palette to choose from, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
I definitely wanted to emphasize the lineages, right? Like the lineages give you a ton of really cool customization in this game while remaining mechanically simple, right? It's hard. I think it's hard to do that. I think it's hard to make a game that is, fun and engaging and makes your character feel unique, but at the same time that is fairly simple. And I really think that they landed that pretty well actually. Another thing I would like to point out that where they go out of their way for you to customize your character is the connections section. So on the back of your character sheet, there's 3 questions you get to answer about yourself, where you imagine your character visually and their history. And there's 3 connections you get to ask members of your party, where you get to start to build relationships with them, which meant that, like, as of session 1, my character, who was like this cyborg mouse, was like, I felt she was already cool and unique and interesting because she had a custom, like, because I'd used their mixed ancestry rules, right? And because I had defined a cool visual aesthetic for her, and because she had unique relationships to the different members of the party, right? And so, like, even though she was a level 1 seraph with a probably pretty basic build, and there's not that many all that different builds of a level 1 seraph that you could make, right? She still felt kind of like her own character and different from someone else's knight in shining armor, you know.
mhm.
Um So yeah, I also want to highlight that. That's the connection system and sort of those questions they put on the character sheet.
Yes, yeah, she did
Even the
feel.
experiences, actually, that comes to mind now too, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. In this game,
the
basically, experiences replace proficiencies or
yeah,
skills in other games, and the differences from other games is that like experiences are entirely customizable. You don't
yeah,
have to pick from athletics, persuasion, and deception. You can just write down what your skill is, and it can be tree climber or master of disguise or chop chop, as was in the case of one of our party members.
yeah. Yeah, like, instead of having to give you the mechanical options that in summary together give you the feeling of I protect the party, you can literally just write on your character sheet experience number 1, I protect the party. And every time you do a roll related to that, you can spend a hope and increase that roll by 2, you know?
Mhm.
Um so it's just like every time you do something about protecting the party, you can get that little bonus, right? And so it's really fun and customizable because the game doesn't need to give you options for everything the player could possibly imagine. The game just needs to provide a little blank spot where the player can fill in what matters to them, how they want to define their character, right? And
Mhm.
then boom, there you go. Spend a hope, you protect the party. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I wanted to say, from the GM side of things,
Mhm.
the fact that there aren't a lot of like rules to follow means that the game is very easy to customize. It's easy to homebrew ideas. For example, I came up with like my own take on montage tests, kind of like
Mhm.
skill challenges in this game, by combining um, timers, no, not timers, countdown mechanics, which they kind of provide you with,
Mhm.
and imagining how success with fear, success with hope, and failures with fear and hope would affect the countdown.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, right? It was easy because I didn't have to consider a very large framework of rules. I could just kind of come up with it. And even in countdowns, they provide you like with the idea of countdowns, and they provide you
Mhm.
with some like ideas of like what a countdown could be, but they don't tell you what a countdown is in Daggerheart. They're more like, this is kind of like how it could work. This is what could trigger the countdown to tick up or down, and this is how the countdown could be resolved once it reaches 0. And none of that is mandatory, but it's all inspirational. And like I read that section, and then I came up with my own countdown for the adventure based on what I thought made sense for a montage that was essentially you crossing a forest that was dangerous but not impossible to cross.
So, on that note, do you want to talk about campaign frames a little bit? Because I feel like they highlight this kind of GM flexibility you were talking about.
Yes, campaign frames are a very cool idea. Daggerheart provides you like a lot of TTRPG books, especially setting guides, provide you with like a simple starter adventure. The D&D Ravnica setting book comes to mind, but in
Sure. I mean,
Daggerheart,
Faerun also comes
in
to mind.
yeah, in the core, in the core book, in the core Daggerheart book, there's not one, but 5 different campaign frames. These campaign frames are not exactly a starter adventure. They are less informative than that, but they provide you essentially, every campaign frame provides you with a setting, a conflict, some custom mechanics, an inciting incident, and advice for how to run Daggerheart in this campaign setting with this inciting incident. Essentially, they are a GM facing tool that a first time player group, or even just like someone who's just new to Daggerheart, can use to quickly kind of jumpstart an adventure without having to worry that they are homebrewing in a new system, right? Because like one of the anxieties about like running your own campaign in a new system is that you don't know it. and
Yeah.
that's why settings like published settings are great. And Daggerheart kind of settles on this middle ground between not providing you like a full adventure with like everything stat blocks and stat blocks, story, NPCs, but they do provide you with like a setting, a couple of like loosely fleshed out NPCs that are important to this world, and a couple of like custom mechanics and bits of trivia, and some of them provide you with stat blocks, but not all of them.
Yeah, I really love campaign frames because they're not adventures. An adventure is always so specific, right? And for me, when I'm starting a campaign, I'm probably just gonna build some kind of sandbox that I let players loose in. And so for me, having a full adventure is not actually that helpful. Because adventures are like so specific, and I'm like, I'm not sure I want to run. I like Dragon World, but I'm not sure I want to run the specific dragon adventure in Dragon World, for my players. And
Hmm.
from that perspective, I just love the middle ground that campaign frames offer you. Not only that, but they also implicitly are the game, like they're the game explicitly telling you, homebrew me, adapt me. I can serve many different types of narratives and many different types of worlds. And it's not just a paragraph of lip service. I'm actually going to show you how to do it. Here's 5 very different worlds with very different tones. Which one of these do you want to play with your crew? And I, I think that's awesome. I think it's awesome that they're encouraging people to adapt their game. It really heightens the flexibility of the game, and it's really convenient to have these pre-made campaign frames because you can read the little like starter blurb to your whole party. And, for a novice party, you can just say, which of these 5 do you want to play? Right? Like, imagine everybody's a novice, right? Nobody's ever played a D&D game before. Nobody's ever played TTRPG before, but we picked up Daggerheart because we all like Critical Role or something. Here we go. I can just read all 5 worlds in the back out to you guys, and you can say, oh, that one, we want to play that one, right? And so before any like super in-depth, nuanced conversations need to be had, where a lot of like TTRPG game experience is required, about like, oh, do you prefer soft world building or hard world building or whatever? It can just be like, here's 5 different flavors. Do you want pistachio or vanilla? Pick. Um, I love
Yeah,
that.
there's literally like, and they're so diverse. Like, just to bring an example, there's a like more dark military, like grounded war setting.
Yeah,
There
like Game
is
of Thrones.
a yeah, there's a Ghibli inspired Nausicaa or Princess Mononoke nature versus civilization one, which is the one we played.
Yeah.
There is a sci-fi kind of like sci-fi one, very inspired
Mm.
by Horizon Zero Dawn. There's a Beast Feast called
Yeah,
Beast
I wanted
Feast
to
that
point
is
that one
like
out. There
dungeon
is
food.
like, yeah, like we just go into dungeons and eat monsters setting,
Yeah,
in the back of this thing.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it's really awesome because often new players, like this game, one thing I want to highlight, this game is so freaking accessible. And one of the best, and so much of the advice it gives is really good advice for new players, I feel, which is like,
Hmm.
these are the rules, but you can break them. That's perfect. Because then when they're not confident, just stick to the rules, just do what the thing says. But right from day one, it's getting you used to the idea. Eventually, as you get better at this, break the rules, right? Do other stuff. Try new settings. Try the Beast Feast setting. Try making your own setting. What if you want to make a cross between Beast Feast and the Nausicaa one, right? The Witherwild,
Hmm.
right? Like, what if you combine those two? What happens then, right? The game very much fosters your creativity and teaches you that the point of the game is not really to level up and beat other people, but is to tell a wonderful story together, which I think is a great place to start new players because I think those types of games run into less conflict, right? It's not that a super like level up oriented crunchy game um,
Can't be
can't
fun.
can't be fun. It's just that this game teaches you to play in a way that generally doesn't cause that much conflict because it's about everybody having fun together and telling their story together and not like optimizing and like trying to win. So like a lot of like bad player behavior that can be encouraged by poorly understanding like this other type of game is kind of prevented in this game. This game from the start teaches you everybody needs to have fun, play nice together, be flexible, make stuff up, go for it, tell your stories. That's the fun. I think that's really
Hmm.
wonderful.
Yes, yes, absolutely true. and I had a fun time adapting the Witherwild. So if you don't mind joining me in the like Thea self-indulgence corner for a moment, Ceres.
I
Uh,
of
h-
course.
how did you
It's my
like?
favorite place to be on a Sunday afternoon.
Well, welcome to my self-indulgent corner. How did you like it? How did you like my the one shot? What did you think?
I liked it. I thought it was very bold of you to start us off with a mission already pre-established. I mean, we can't talk about it too much because a little bit of this is also spoilers for the one shot that's coming after these episodes. But I thought it was very bold of you to start us very in medias res, but I thought it turned out quite well. I think you pulled that off. I thought that was very cool. And I liked the world building aspect of the technology of the Havenites that you showed off, the Chrome Wizards and stuff like that. I thought that was very
Hmm.
cool. Um, I did think that the moose fight suffered from. I'm not sure if it was necessarily your fault, but for me, the moose fight suffered from the fact that I wasn't in range most of the fight. Um,
Yeah, the moose fight. I mean, spoiler for our for
yeah,
our
that's the thing.
listeners.
That's
There's
why
a
I think
moose
we shouldn't
fight.
talk about it. Like, I think we should
Okay.
strike this whole part from the record because,
Okay.
like, they if they want to make their opinions, you know what I mean? Like we can talk about things generally and vaguely, but I feel that if we talk too directly about it, we're just kind of spoilering the one shot for them, and I don't think the one shot will be fun to listen to if you already know everything.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Note it down. Okay. So yeah, absolutely. Campaign frames. It was very fun for me to adapt the Witherwild. And to kind of interpret it my own way, right? Coming up with
Yeah.
what is Haven like? What is their technology like? I didn't
Yeah, I
want them
thought the
to
way you did their
feel.
technology was really cool, and from what I
Thanks. I
understand,
didn't
that
want
wasn't
them
in the
to
book.
feel. No, 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 no. And I didn't want them to feel too like just like steampunky or industrial. I wanted their
Yeah.
technology to be very magical, and I also
Yeah.
didn't want it to be like your Heart and Steel techno magic because like we're also
Yeah.
playing in a setting that kind
Yeah.
of felt a little bit like it. So I was like, I don't want it to be the same as that, and I don't want it to be steampunk. So I had to figure out how to make it my own, and I
Yeah.
had to make my own, monsters. I had to make my own stat blocks. And homebrewing in Daggerheart is so much easier than
Yeah.
homebrewing in D&D. And the fact that like you control the fear, like the flow of fear as the DM, means that even if you accidentally make something overpowered, you can just kind of hold back. And more on that later on in the negative section. But like there
Yeah.
are positives to this.
Yeah, on the note of fear, and we've talked around it, but maybe not directly about it. The hope and fear system are awesome. It is
Yes.
awesome that my character generates resources by trying to achieve things. Um, in D&D, often the dynamic is reversed. You're discouraged from trying new things because if you expend resources on them and you fail because you're not good at them, then you've depleted your character, right? Like it's net negative for you. And this
Yeah.
game, by continuously trying and experimenting and attempting to move the plot forward, you generate hope for yourself, charging up your abilities, and fear for the DM, which allows them to progress the plot in ways that are negative to your character, but very dramatic in the moment, right? Um, and so I think the hope and